Kentucky basketball's annual blue and white game is always a blast. So who exactly is going to stand out for the Cats tonight?
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be speculating over what exactly is going on tonight during the blue and white game. We're going to break down who's the most likely to do a variety of things in various categories, leading and scoring, dominating their matchup, being overlooked. Who are some of the under-the-radar players that may kind of go unnoticed here as we get closer and closer to the season? And then to wrap up the show, I want to be clear with something, an opinion that I have. Kentucky basketball is not adding another player before the season starts. Those of you on social media who are trying to build up this hype train, appreciate it, but we don't need to get too carried away. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. And if you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. And if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribe there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. And if you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show. And if you're listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribed there as well. All right. Let's go ahead and get into it. Kentucky basketball playing in the blue and white game tonight. Gates have already opened at the time of this recording. We're going to break down for those of you who aren't actually going to be able to watch it, because for anybody in attendance, you can't actually go and watch the game online. Yes, I believe the UK Sports Network is going to be having a broadcast up, but it's not going to be focusing on anything actually going on the court. It's going to be more focused on interviews. You'll be able to hear kind of what's going on, but you're not going to actually be able to see any sort of action. So we're going to be speculating over what's going on tonight. In case you don't know, this is the annual full-on scrimmage that Kentucky basketball does. You are getting 100% effort. As Mark Pope has stated, I believe he said something to KSR earlier today or earlier this week talking about how it's going to be all out. The energy is going to be there. They're going to be diving for balls. They're going to be playing with their hearts out on the floor. They're going to be going full force here. So, with that in mind, knowing that we're going to see a very serious scrimmage here, knowing that we're also looking at some great performances in years past that have kind of gotten us excited about what's to come, let's speculate over who's the most likely to do a variety of things. Today I've got lead in scoring, dominate their matchup, be overlooked, be the most efficient, and then win MVP, be the most valuable player on the floor. First of all, let's just acknowledge again, we've seen some great performances in this event in years past. We've seen a variety of players go off for a number of points, dropping 50-plus at times, and really setting themselves apart before we start this season as somebody that we can identify as a potential bucket getter, legitimate scorer, just a legitimate player overall. I come into this expecting, despite an extremely balanced roster, a couple of people to stand out in that regard. Now, are we going to see a number of 50-point, are we going to see a 50-point performance tonight? I don't think so, but I think that we're going to see some flashes potentially of greatness from a couple of players. Pause here for water, because I consistently have the driest throat on the planet whenever I start recording these shows. Who's the most likely to lead Kentucky basketball in scoring? There are a number of different players that you could pick for this, and I want you guys in the comments below, leave your thoughts here. Tell me who you think is going to lead in scoring. I'm going to go with Jaxson Robinson. This is the pretty clear-cut choice. I think you could pick a number of guys, but Robinson is probably going to lead in scoring. That's just my guess. And look, he may not be the most efficient. That's why there's two categories here. But I do think he's going to score the most because I simply think he's going to put up the most shots. He didn't just spontaneously lead BYU in scoring off the bench last year, averaging just a few shots a game. He shot almost 12 per contest, and he shot, let's see here, he shot almost 7 threes per game, 6.9 threes per contest last year. Yeah, he's a shooter. He's going to go out there and he's going to do one thing. He's going to shoot. Obviously, he's talked about adding versatility to his game, proving that he can be a legitimate scorer, but I think you're going to see him step out onto the floor, adding defensive versatility to his game, like showing that he can play defense. I think I worded that incorrectly, but I think he's going to go out there and shoot the rock. Leading and scoring, I think it's going to be Jaxson Robinson. You could go with somebody like Andrew Carr. You could go with somebody like Kobe Brea, possibly. You could go with somebody like Kirk Carissa if he heats up. That kind of leads me into dominate their matchup. Who's the most likely to dominate their matchup? And what I mean by that is I think you've got a pretty decent idea of what Kentucky wants to do 1 through 5, regardless of whether or not you're looking at 1A and 1B at the position, right? Like, it doesn't matter if they're starters or not. You know what Kentucky wants to do rotationally there. I think that you'll have, this is the way that I view it, and this is the way I've got it in my notes. I think you'll have Lamont Butler against Kirk Carissa. I think you'll have Kobe Brea against Otega Owe. I think you'll have Jaxson Robinson either against Otega Owe or Colin Chandler. I think that you'll have Andrew Carr against Ainsley Almanor or Jaxson Robinson. And then I think you'll have Brandon Garrison against Amari Williams. Like, that's your 1 through 5. Who's the most likely to dominate their matchup? I'm going to give you 2 options here. I'm going to pick one, but I'm going to give you 2. Lamont Butler is my selection to dominate his matchup against Kirk Carissa. I like this kid. I think he's talented. I think he's a great defender. And I think in spots like this, one of 2 things could happen. Carissa could start hot and just go ballistic in this game, right? He's got the ability to heat up. Butler is the best defender that Kentucky has on roster, and I'm coming into this expecting him to play well. If we're going full force, if we're playing with all energy out on the court, I think Butler is going to win that matchup. He's going to dominate it. And I don't think that Carissa, he's not a bad defender, but he's certainly not the defender that Butler is. I would expect Butler to go out there and show out as PG1. Does this mean that Kirk Carissa is a bad player? Does it mean that he's a bad guard? Absolutely not. Not a chance. Carissa could start for this team, and I think that they would look exactly the same. In fact, I think if you're looking at the way Kentucky's going to run their rotations this year, a lot of guys are going to split time pretty evenly. I think that's going to be the case for Butler and Carissa. I just think that tonight, if we're picking somebody to go out there and really wow against their matchup, I'm taking Lamont Butler. You could also, for fun, you could go with Andrew Carr over Ainsley Almanor, just simply because of the height difference, and then also reports of how efficient Carr has been throughout camp. Hold that thought. We'll talk about that later on in the show. I think that Carr could be another solid selection here. So Jaxson Robinson to lead in scoring. Lamont Butler to really show out against his matchups. We'll continue to speculate here over the blue and white game. Before we do that, though, I do want to tell you guys about our friends over at Hims. Guys, sometimes intimate moments happen spontaneously, and we always want to be ready so that we can perform in the bedroom. And Hims provides access to treatments that can help you stay hard and last longer, giving you that boost of confidence so you can be ready whenever the mood strikes. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. You can get all of that out of the way. Nothing awkward, nothing weird, pretty straightforward online. All you got to do is answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option for you. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. You can start for free online if you visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products, which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. All right, continuing along here on the Friday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. Continuing along here to speculate over the blue and white game. What do we think is going to happen for Kentucky basketball in this contest? Well, we've speculated over who's most likely to lead in scoring, who's most likely to dominate against their matchups, and then now, who's the most likely to get overlooked? I think that there are two players that fit perfectly in this description. No, it's not Travis Perry. Travis Perry has gotten a lot of love and attention from the media, myself included, over the course of these last couple of months. Don't think he's going to get overlooked in this game. I think people are going to watch what he's doing. I think Colin Chandler will get his due whenever talking about, he's somebody that's raw, but he's definitely got a very high ceiling and he can provide a lot of value for Kentucky in the future. Hey, he did this, and this really well. Players that may not get talked about enough, nearly enough. Kobe Brea is at the top of my list. I have continued to rave about this kid, about how good he is at scoring. We can talk about numbers. We're not going to dive into that today. You know that he's pretty much a 50% shooter from beyond the arc. We don't have to get too far into it. All I know is that he did not have a high enough volume at Dayton. He was not appreciated enough there, I don't think. Yes, Dayton was very good, and yes, they had a lot of pieces around him, but I think he should have gotten the ball more. Brea, in a up-tempo system that will provide him more shot opportunities, I think he's going to explode onto the scene this year. And in games like this, you may not necessarily get to see a ton of that yet. And I think he's going to score. He's going to score what he needs to score to be like, okay. But nothing incredible. And I think he's going to get overlooked because of that. I think Brandon Garrison could also get overlooked as well. Amari Williams, I expect a lot from. I expect him to be a very, very good player for Kentucky this upcoming season. And I think he's going to command a lot of attention, both from reporters, both from media, broadcast, opposition alike. And so therefore, I think Brandon Garrison may get lost in the fold a little bit at times. I think that's going to be the case, at least in this game, at the very least in this blue and white game. He's got really, really solid fundamentals on offense. He's a really good defender. That's what he was known for coming out of high school. The former McDonald's All-American is going to, like Colin Chandler, be somebody that provides future value for Kentucky and will definitely provide value this year. Just in situations like this, I think he may get overlooked a little bit. All right. Who's going to be the most efficient for Kentucky? Got two options here. They both play the same position. Give me Ainsley Almanor or Andrew Carr for two reasons. One reason apiece. First of all, Ainsley, I think that he will play his role well coming off the bench. He was a plus shooter at FDU last year. And I think that in a smaller volume, he will become even more efficient. And he'll have an opportunity to come off the bench and take somewhere between 2 and 4 threes a game. And I think he's going to consistently hit 2 of them, 1.7, 1.8 of them. If you can go 2 of 3 from beyond the arc, and you can be right there even on plus minus box score, and you can provide 6 points off the bench whenever you need. I mean, hey, that's a great role player. Could he be more than that? Absolutely. And I think that if you give him a little bit more volume, I think he still stays pretty efficient. I think in a game like this, you could look at him, come off the bench, go 3 of 4 or something like that from beyond the arc, make a layup. All of a sudden, he's 4 for 5 from the floor. He's got double-digit points. He's looking really solid, and it's a good bench. It's a good bench night for Almanor. Andrew Carr could also be incredibly efficient because of just how well he's shooting from beyond the arc, apparently in camp. And there have been days apparently where he's just not missed a shot, period, according to Mark Pope. Is that true? I believe him. So therefore, who's the most efficient? Well, Andrew Carr would probably be a pretty solid guess there. Who's to win MVP, the most valuable player? And I put here for MVP, the most well-rounded performer. Pause for water. The most well-rounded performer for Kentucky basketball in this game. I talked about it on yesterday's show. Give me Amari Williams. The passing, the defense, the rebounding, and the scoring that's just efficient enough for his position. You'll get double-digit points. You may get double-digit rebounds. Actually, no, I'll say you should get double-digit rebounds just based on what we've seen from him in a Kentucky jersey. You will get assists. You will get defense, of course. Most well-rounded player on the floor. Full stop. He brings you everything. He gives you everything outside of three-point shooting, but just mask that in with scoring. Like, forget about where it's coming from. He's scoring points. So to recap, who's most likely to lead in scoring? That's Jaxson Robinson, in my opinion. Dominate their matchups. That's Lamont Butler. Be overlooked. I think Kobe Brea deserves more attention. Be the most efficient. I'm going to go with Ainsley Almanor. And then win MVP, I'm going to go Amari Williams in this game. All right. I want to wrap up the show talking to you about something that's kind of been floating around on Twitter. Kentucky basketball's not adding another player to their roster. Like this year's roster. I'm going to explain why just a second. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. NFL fans, you can continue your season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's all over at FanDuel.com. Again, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets when you place your first $5 bet over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, continuing, or wrapping up, I should say. Today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Really appreciate you guys hanging out. If you've got any comments about this blue and white game, of course, this game will be over by tonight when some of you will be listening to this. Of course, we'll continue to speculate. I will try and get you guys some info over the weekend to kind of see what came out of it. Obviously, things are going to go public. Of course, we'll dive into that whenever we get to it. But first, Kentucky's not adding another player to their roster. If you've heard the news, which I'm sure a lot of you have if you keep up with college basketball, Virginia head coach Tony Bennett has abruptly and just shockingly retired with with less than a week before the season technically starts and just a few weeks before it actually starts. And there really didn't seem to be a great reason given. And I think there was a lot of pointing towards this current state of college basketball, at least from media members who were discussing this. Bennett talked a little bit about this himself, if I'm not mistaken, in his press conference. Some of it, most of it, I disagree with. But, hey, you know what? I don't have 6 NCAA tournament wins on my resume. So, you know what? He's certainly one of the best defensive coaches that I'm going to see in my lifetime. But he had brought over some transfer portal players. And I feel for those guys, as do a lot of people, these transfer portal players who came from really good schools and expected to compete and play underneath one of the greatest coaches in the sport. And he just bailed with like a week before everything starts. And there's a guy that some people online, not just on Twitter, but on various spots, you guys have been commenting about TJ Power, who's a player that transferred to Virginia. He's a 5-star player from Duke. We've talked about this kid before on the show. Go look at his numbers. He hardly played last year. He averaged like 7 minutes a game. He wasn't really involved in the rotation. His statistics don't look great efficiency-wise, but if you go and actually dive into how he shot from beyond the arc, he's a pretty good scorer. And given a larger role and more time to develop, he could be a really, really good player, like a really good player. That's why he was a 5-star. And some people have been saying, hey, this Duke kid that transferred to Virginia, he could transfer out and he could come to Kentucky. TJ Power, you are a Kentucky Wildcat. And obviously, some of those Twitter posts were made in jest. Some of them were just kidding. Some of them were serious. And I just want to be clear, because a couple of you guys, and I'm not getting on anybody. I'm not being like, no, we're not adding somebody that's stupid. You shouldn't say that. It's just, with the way that things are currently, it doesn't make any sense for Kentucky to add anybody. They're not going to add another player. Their roster is complete. They've got all the guys they want for this year. And frankly, I'm thrilled to see what this makeup of kids, like this makeup of men, essentially now, because all of them are so experienced and all of them are seniors. What they do on the court, I'm excited to see these guys. This was actually a conversation, if I'm not mistaken, like a month or so ago, like maybe even further back from that, of like, okay, yes, it was further back from that. Okay, does Kentucky go and add anybody else for that last scholarship? And then it was kind of like, no, Kentucky's not going to rush to add anybody because they don't want to mess with the chemistry that they're starting to form here. And I think that's the case here. I will say, we've seen crazy things before. We saw Kentucky try and add about half their roster before the season started, about a month before the season started last year. Obviously, that's hyperbole, but you understand what I'm saying. Power's a great player. I think he's a really good player, top 20 player nationally coming out of high school, number 6 power forward in the country, number 1 player out of the state of Massachusetts. He's 6'9", 215. He'd be a great addition for anybody. It doesn't make sense for Kentucky now, and frankly, I don't know if Kentucky needs him as far as his skill set goes right now. Yes, it would be nice to have, but at that power forward spot, you've already got 2 guys that you brought in that are around 6'9" and shoot. I don't necessarily know if you need that. So Kentucky, I don't think is adding a player, even though like any addition like that would be welcome. Like a 5-star would be cool. It just doesn't make sense for them to. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave those in the YouTube comments below. You can hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.